If you think you know darkness, think again. Before we dive into one of the most disturbing cases you'll ever hear, smash that subscribe button, hit the like, and drop a comment telling me if you'd survive what you're about to witness, because trust me, after this story, you'll never look at death the same way again. The call came in at the 47 a.m. on a freezing November morning in Portland, Maine. Detective Sarah Chen had been asleep for less than an hour when her phone erupted with the shrill ring that every investigator dreads. The voice on the other end belonged to Officer Marcus Reynolds, and he was breathless, almost panicked. "Detective, you need to get to Riverside Funeral Home now. I can't even explain this over the phone." When Chen arrived 20 minutes later, the scene was chaos. 3 patrol cars sat with lights blazing, painting the Victorian-style funeral home in an eerie, pulsating glow. Officers stood in clusters, some of them looking pale, one young rookie bent over the bushes retching. Chen approached Reynolds, who stood at the entrance, his hand shaking. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" He just pointed inside. "Basement." But Sarah, nothing prepared me for this. Nothing in 20 years on the force? The funeral home's interior was exactly what you'd expect. Tasteful burgundy carpets, soft lighting, the faint smell of lilies and formaldehyde. But as Chen descended the wooden stairs to the basement, that familiar smell gave way to something else. Something wrong. The basement was divided into 2 sections, the embalming room, sterile and clinical, and a storage room behind a heavy door marked authorized personnel only. That door stood open now, and Chen understood why the rookie was vomiting. Inside were 12 bodies, but these weren't. Awaiting burial. These were bodies that should have already been laid to rest by grieving families who had paid thousands of dollars for those services. Instead, they lay stacked on metal shelves like inventory in a warehouse. In various states of decay, "Jesus Christ," Chen whispered. Reynolds appeared behind her. The owner is Marcus Whitmore, 52 years old, respected in the community. Families paid him to cremate or bury their loved ones. He kept the bodies, kept the money. Chen's mind raced. Where is he now? That's the thing. He's gone, completely vanished. His car's missing. His house is empty. His bank accounts were cleaned out yesterday. It's like he knew we were coming. How could he have known? Chen walked through the room, forcing herself to look at each victim of this unthinkable betrayal. An elderly woman. A young man. A child, no older than 7, still clutching a stuffed rabbit. "We need to identify all of them," Chen said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Their families deserve to know." As the crime scene unit began their grim work, Chen noticed a metal filing cabinet. She pulled on latex gloves and carefully opened the top drawer. Inside were files, dozens of them. Each contained a death certificate, a cremation authorization form, and detailed notes. Chen pulled out a file at random. Margaret Sullivan. Aged 73. The family had paid $8,500 for cremation, but Whitmore's notes told a different story. Body retained. Ashes provided. Mixture of wood ash and bone meal from pet crematorium. Family satisfied. Profit $7,200. Her blood ran cold. He hadn't just kept the bodies. He'd given families fake ashes. But as Chen flipped through more files, a pattern emerged that made her stomach drop. Some files had additional notes, cryptic references to special clients and premium services. Dates, times, pickup locations, and payment amounts that were far higher than any funeral service. "Reynolds," she called out. "We need to find Marcus Whitmore now. Because I don't think this is just about money." That's when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 3 words in an attachment. "Check the freezer." The attachment was a photo of a large commercial freezer. Through the frosted glass door, Chen could make out human shapes. She looked at Reynolds, her face ashen. "Get a warrant for every property Whitmore owns. Storage units, warehouses, everything. And put out an APB. This man is extremely dangerous. You think there are more bodies?" Chen stared at the photo. "I think we've only found the beginning. And whoever sent me this photo, they know exactly what Whitmore's been doing." She turned back to the filing cabinet, pulling out more folders. Then she found it. A file marked VIP clients. Do not file with regular records. Inside were names, not of the dead, but of the living, prominent names. A city councilman, a respected surgeon, a wealthy businessman. And next to each name, a service description that made Chen's blood run ice cold. But when she opened the locked metal box at the bottom of the filing cabinet, searching for more evidence, what she found changed everything. Thanks for watching. Follow for more. A SWAT team breached the door, and Detective Chen stepped inside, then froze in absolute horror. The room was a laboratory filled with gleaming medical equipment, sterile examination tables, and sophisticated monitors. But what occupied those tables made her blood run cold? Bodies. Freshly deceased, connected to a web of tubes and wires, machines humming a quiet, eerie tune in the sterile air. What in God's name is this? Reynolds breathed, his voice a hoarse whisper as he came up behind Chen. She forced herself to move closer, her legs feeling like lead. On the first table lay a young woman, no older than 30. The chart at the foot of her bed said she had died 3 days ago. But she was hooked up to a heart-lung machine, her chest rising and falling at a grotesque, artificial rhythm. Chen's gaze darted to the next table, an elderly man, dead for 5 days, also kept animated by the machines, then the next and the next, 12 bodies in total, all preserved in this horrifying, unnatural state. What kind of monster would do this on a cluttered desk in the corner? Chen found the answer. Files, piles of them, each one detailing an experimental procedure more sickening than the last, unauthorized organ harvesting, bodies used for medical training without a shred of consent. And then she saw the client list, and the floor felt like it was falling away. Prestigious pharmaceutical companies testing new drugs, medical device manufacturers, even a few rogue surgeons practicing forbidden techniques. Marcus Whitmore hadn't just been stealing bodies from his funeral home. He'd been running a black market medical facility, selling access to the recently deceased for tens of thousands of dollars a session. He wasn't just a grave robber. He was the gatekeeper to a chamber of horrors for the rich and powerful. Suddenly, a shout from another room shattered the silence. "Detective, you need to see this." Chen ran toward the SWAT officer's voice. He stood before a door she hadn't noticed. Labeled preparation room. Inside, 3 more bodies lay on gurneys, freshly prepared. But these weren't days or weeks old. The tags on their toes indicated they had died within the last 12 hours. Chen's blood turned to ice as she read the preparation notes. Scheduled for transport, pickup 8 p.m. tonight. Destination, Ashford Estate. She glanced at her watch, 7:15 p.m. Gregory Ashford, the district attorney candidate. He was having bodies delivered to his home? Set up surveillance outside, she commanded, her voice sharp. No one moves on that pickup until I give the word. We're going to see exactly who shows up to collect bodies from a sitting down candidate as the team moved to follow her orders. Chen's heart stopped. She recognized one of the faces on the gurneys. She'd seen that face just this morning. Frantically, she pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, scrolling through recent case files, and there it was, a missing person report filed by a frantic wife, David Martinez. 47 years old. Vanished after his night shift at the hospital, the very same hospital where Gregory Ashford's brother was the chief of surgery. A spiderweb of connections began to form in her mind, each thread more sinister than the last. This isn't just about Whitmore anymore, Chen whispered to herself. This is a network. And it goes all the way to the top. Just then, her phone buzzed with another message from that unknown number, the one that had led her here. The message was chillingly direct. The pickup isn't coming. You've been set up. Check the funeral home now. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She immediately radioed the units she'd left guarding Riverside Funeral Home. No response. She tried again. Only static crackled back. Reynolds, get units to the funeral home immediately. Move. She yelled, a new wave of panic rising within her. But even as she gave the order, she knew with a terrible certainty what they would find. The anonymous informant hadn't been helping her. They had been manipulating her. They wanted every police officer in the city focused on this warehouse, leaving the funeral home completely exposed. Her phone rang. A call from the fire department. The fire chief's voice was grim as he reported a massive explosion and a 5-alarm fire at Riverside Funeral Home. Chen felt the last of her strength drain away. It was all burning. All the evidence. The bodies, the files, the financial records that could connect the VIP clients to Whitmore's monstrous operation all turning to ash. And Marcus Whitmore, he was either on the run or already dead. A loose and snipped by powerful people who had far more to lose than just money. But as the smoke billowed into the night sky, Chen realized the people behind us had made one critical mistake. They had led her here. To this warehouse, they had shown her these bodies. They had given her undeniable proof that this conspiracy was real, active, and utterly ruthless. The fire wasn't the end of the evidence. It was the beginning of her hunt. The question wasn't just who was involved. It was how high this evil reached. And how many more people would they kill to keep their dark secrets buried? The game had just begun. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next one. Inside the locked metal box were photographs. Dozens of them. But these weren't funeral photos or identification pictures. These were surveillance images, grainy and taken from a distance, showing people entering and exiting what looked like an abandoned industrial building on the outskirts of Portland. Detective Chen spread the photos across the embalming table, her hands trembling slightly as she began to piece together what she was seeing. Each photograph had a date stamp, going back nearly 3 years. And in every single one, she recognized at least one face from the VIP client list. These were the city's elite, the powerful, the untouchable. But what were they doing at a derelict warehouse? This wasn't just fraud, she muttered to herself, the cold air of the mortuary failing to numb the growing dread in her gut. Whitmore was documenting something. Building insurance, maybe. Or leverage. This was a meticulous record of secrets, a treasure trove of blackmail material. Reynolds appeared at her shoulder, his face grim, snapping her out of her thoughts. "We got a hit on Whitmore's car. Traffic cam picked it up heading north on I-95 about 40 minutes ago. State police are setting up roadblocks." But Chen barely heard him. Her attention was locked on one particular photograph, taken just 2 weeks ago. It showed Marcus Whitmore himself, standing outside that same industrial building, deep in conversation with a man in an expensive suit. The man's face was partially obscured by shadow, but something about his posture, the confident way he stood, the expensive cut of his suit, triggered a flicker of recognition in Chen's mind. She grabbed her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. She pulled up the city database, cross-referencing the VIP names from the list with recent news articles and public records. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she narrowed down the possibilities. Within minutes, she had it. The man in the suit was Gregory Ashford, a prominent defense attorney who had recently announced his candidacy for district attorney. A man whose entire campaign was built on promises of cleaning up corruption and bringing justice to Portland. The irony was suffocating. "Oh my God," Chen whispered, the words barely audible. "This goes so much deeper than I thought." The web of conspiracy was larger and more tangled than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about a funeral director cutting corners. It was about the very foundations of the city's justice system. Just then, her phone rang. The sharp, unfamiliar tone cut through the silence of the morgue. It was the same unknown number that had texted her earlier. This time, she answered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. "Detective Chen." The voice that came through the speaker was digitally distorted, a mechanical and unsettling drone that sent a chill down her spine. "You're looking in the wrong place." "Who is this? How did you get this number?" Chen demanded, her mind racing to place the voice, to find any hint of its origin. "The bodies in the funeral home are just the discards," the voice continued, ignoring her questions. "The ones Whitmore couldn't sell. If you want to find what really happened, you need to find the building in those photographs. You have 6 hours before the evidence disappears forever." Chen's blood ran cold. "Wait, sell? What do you mean, sell? And who are you?" The implications were monstrous, almost horrifying to comprehend. "Sell bodies? but the line went dead. The sudden silence was more unnerving than the distorted voice. Chen's mind raced, trying to process the horrifying new information. Sell bodies. To whom? For what purpose? She looked back at the VIP client list, at those strange service descriptions that had chilled her earlier. Medical research. Educational specimens. Experimental procedures. It was all starting to make a sickening kind of sense. This wasn't about respecting the dead. It was about profiting from them in the most ghoulish way possible. She snapped into action, the detective taking over from the shocked woman. Reynolds, get Captain Morrison on the line now. And I need a tactical team, a warrant for that industrial building, and every available unit. We're not waiting for Whitmore anymore. We're running out of time. 45 minutes later, Chen stood in the dark, a parking lot 3 blocks from the industrial building. She was coordinating with a SWAT team as a cold rain began to fall in heavy sheets, plastering her hair to her face and soaking through her jacket. The building's ownership was a ghost trail. It was registered to a shell corporation, which was owned by another shell corporation, which eventually traced back to a medical supply company that had gone bankrupt years ago. On paper, the building should have been empty, a hollowed-out carcass of industry. But the thermal imaging told a different story. There were heat signatures inside. Multiple sources moving. And power was definitely running to the building, a steady hum that was barely audible over the drumming rain, despite it being officially abandoned and off the grid. Someone was in there. We go in quiet, Chen instructed the SWAT commander, her voice low and firm. No sirens, no announcements. If there's evidence inside, I don't want anyone having time to destroy it. We catch them cold. The SWAT team moved like shadows through the rain, their black gear blending into the night as they approached the building from 3 sides. Chen followed close behind the primary entry team, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The smell of wet asphalt and decay filled the air. This was it. The point of no return. The front door was locked, a heavy steel barrier. But it took the team less than 30 seconds to breach it with a hydraulic tool that barely made a sound. They moved inside, weapons raised, the beams of their tactical flashlights cutting sharp, dancing lines through the oppressive darkness. The air inside was cold, sterile, and carried that same fundamentally wrong smell Chen had noticed at the funeral home, a chemical sweetness layered over something metallic and organic. The main floor appeared empty, just a vast, open warehouse space with concrete floors and exposed steel ceiling beams that disappeared into the gloom above. But Chen immediately noticed something odd. The floor was too clean for an abandoned building. There was no dust, no debris, no graffiti, no signs of homeless people or urban explorers having taken shelter. The space was being actively maintained, kept pristine for a reason. Basement access located, one of the SWAT officers called out from the far wall, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. He was pointing to a heavy metal door with a sleek, modern electronic keypad lock. Chen approached, her boots quiet on the smooth concrete. She examined the lock. It was new, expensive, the kind of high-level security you'd find in a high-tech facility or a bank, not an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. This lock was meant to keep people out or to keep something in. Can you bypass it? She asked the team's tech specialist. He stepped forward, pulling out a small, complex device from his kit. Give me 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Every tick of the clock echoed the countdown from the anonymous caller. Chen's instincts were screaming that something was very, very wrong. The anonymous call, the 6-hour deadline, the level of security on this basement door, it all felt like a setup. Someone had wanted her to find this place, but why? Were they guiding her toward the truth or walking her into a trap? The lock beeped softly and then clicked open. The sound was deafening in the charged silence. The SWAT team descended first, a fluid and silent column of black armor and focused intent. Chen was right behind them, her hand resting on her service weapon. The stairs led down into a corridor that was a stark, shocking contrast to the warehouse above. The walls were white tile, The lighting was bright, sterile lead, and the air was filtered and cold. It looked like a hospital hallway, pristine and clinical. They passed several doors, each one a heavy, soundproofed slab of metal, locked and labeled with alphanumeric codes like specimens in a collection. At the end of the long, unnerving corridor was a larger door marked with simple, terrifying words, Laboratoria. Chen's blood ran cold. Laboratory. The word hung in the air, filled with dreadful possibilities. This wasn't just a storage facility. It was a place of work, of science. But what kind of science was being conducted in the secret basement of an abandoned warehouse, funded by the city's elite and supplied by a corrupt funeral home? As the SWAT team prepared to breach the final door, Chen knew she was about to find out, and she had a terrible feeling that she would wish she never had. Chen pulled a file at random from the cabinet. The name on the tab read Margaret Sullivan, aged 73. The cause of death was listed as natural causes. Her family had paid $8,500 for a standard cremation and memorial. Service, a hefty sum, but not unusual. But then Chen saw Whitmore's private note scrawled on a separate sheet tucked. Inside, her blood ran cold. The note said, body retained, ashes provided, mixture of wood ash and bone meal from pet crematorium, family satisfied, profit $7,200. He hadn't just kept the bodies. He'd been giving grieving families fake ashes, fake closure, all while pocketing nearly the entire funeral cost. This was more than just fraud. It was a violation of the most sacred trust. As Chen flipped through more files, a horrifying pattern began to emerge, each one making her stomach drop further. Margaret Sullivan wasn't an isolated case. Dozens of files told the same story of deception and greed. But then she noticed something else. Some files had additional notes, even more cryptic. There were references to special clients and premium services. There were dates and times, pickup locations, and payment amounts that were astronomical. Far higher than any legitimate funeral service could ever charge. What was Whitmore selling? Chen's mind raced through a dozen dark possibilities. Reynolds, she called out. Her voice tight. We need to find Marcus Whitmore. Now, because I don't think this is just about money. Just as she spoke, her phone buzzed on the desk, a text from an unknown number. It contained just 3 words in an attachment. The words were, check the freezer. The attachment was a photo. It showed a large, industrial-grade commercial freezer, the kind you'd see in a warehouse or a butcher shop. Through the frosted glass of the heavy door, Chen could just make out shapes inside, indistinct, but unmistakably human shapes. Her face went ashen as she showed the screen to her partner. Get a warrant, she ordered Reynolds. Her voice barely a whisper, but laced with steel, for every property Whitmore owns or has access. 2. Storage units, warehouses, everything, and put out an all-points bulletin. This man is extremely dangerous. Reynolds looked from the phone back to Chen, his own face pale. You think there are more bodies? He asked. Chen stared at the chilling photo. Her mind connecting the dots, the special clients, the premium services, the pickup locations. This wasn't about funeral fraud anymore. I think, she said slowly, we've only found the beginning. And whoever sent me this photo, they know exactly what Whitmore's been doing. She turned back to the filing cabinet. A renewed urgency propelling her, her hands moved faster now, pulling out more folders. Searching for the key that would unlock this whole nightmare. And then she found it. A file marked in red ink. VIP clients. Do not file with regular records. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she opened it. Inside were names, not of the dead, but of the living, and they were prominent names. A city councilman, a respected surgeon, a wealthy businessman whose face was on billboards all over the city. And next to each name was a service description, a single phrase that made Chen's blood run ice cold. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a small, locked metal box at the bottom of the filing cabinet. It had to contain more. Prying it open with the nearest heavy object, she expected to find more ledgers, more names, more evidence of Whitmore's depraved enterprise. But what she found inside changed everything. It wasn't a ledger. It wasn't a list of names. It was a single, leather-bound book, and when she opened it to the first page, she realized this conspiracy was older, deeper. and more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. Whitmore wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn.